is there something that I want to be doing for the next 10, 20 years? I've lost like half of my friends. One of our readers who said that I've been able to earn $5,000 more in my CPF.
So back to what I was saying. Could be us.
Welcome back everyone to another episode of the Beansprout podcast. Before we started recording this, I was actually joking with Gerald that this is actually the first episode that we should have done. But now we've been about 3 episodes in, and I think people might have noticed that every episode seems to be a little bit different, right? Either the setting is different, the format is a little bit different, and today we're actually trying out a new location. And actually today is an episode that we've been really looking forward to doing, because it's really all about your journey as an entrepreneur, in starting Beansprout, getting into the personal finance space, and really just what has it been like for you over the last 3 to 4 years. So I think today we thought it would be a good opportunity to, in a way, kind of reintroduce Beansprout to the audience. A few months ago when we did this community event where we gathered over 20 plus of our readers in person, actually a lot of people were quite surprised to hear about your personal story. I think there were a lot of fun facts about your own journey that people didn't know about. So we thought that this would be a good time to kind of get into some of these things so that people can also learn a little bit more about you, about the brand, and about the story behind all of this.
Sure.
Yeah. I thought maybe before we get into what Beansprout is today, it might be good to dive into a little bit of what your life was like before this.
My name is Gerald.
Yeah.
I'm the founder of Beansprout. So we started Beansprout in 2021 as a platform to help consumers in Singapore improve their financial wellness. Before I started Beansprout, I was a research analyst in a bank in Singapore. So I am the one who writes research reports on which Singapore stock to buy or sell. I was in this research analyst role for 12 years. In fact, I often tell people that it is my one and only job, which I guess even amongst my friends is not very common nowadays. I think it was something that I actually enjoyed doing, and that was why I was able to stay in the role for 12 years. To me, as an economics graduate, it was a platform that allowed me to understand a lot of how macro developments actually impact financial markets, how it affects our livelihoods, how it affects different industries and companies, and hence impacting how they perform in the financial markets. To me, it was also a very good place to learn many things. And I think something that I will share with graduates are that in your first job, it's probably a lot more important to be able to build out your skill sets. I think for me, fortunately, it was something I was able to do in my first job at Credit Suisse. I think it was how I was able to deepen my analytical skills by looking at how companies perform. It allowed me to learn how to communicate better by then being able to share some of these investment ideas with institutional clients, and also more importantly, build my network, because I think there are very few graduate roles that actually allow someone with just 1 or 2 years of experience to be upfront with a company CEO who has experience running this business for 10 years, 20 years, having billions of revenue, and actually asking them questions about the direction of the company. So I think that was actually a very good platform for me to learn all of this, and I think that actually laid the foundation for me to eventually start Beansprout.
And back then when you were a research analyst, was it easy to explain to people what you actually do?
I think it was simple because for people who invest, they'll probably have come across research reports. They'll probably have read some of this, even if they may not entirely know how to make use of each of these reports. I think the more challenging part was understanding how these reports were serving more institutional investors, who were the bulk of my clients, versus retail investors, and how they had different needs, different objectives, and how the research reports were actually tailored to them.
So was this something that you always knew you wanted to do?
What I often share is that before I entered uni, I didn't even know about the existence of this role.
Right.
Because I think it is something that is very niche, where unless you're in the financial sector, unless you're into the stock market, you may not know that there's actually this dedicated role where people write research reports as a full-time job.
Right.
I think in my alternative universe, I'll probably be a teacher because I think what I do enjoy doing is to be able to understand a lot of these concepts myself and then being able to share it with others.
Yeah, and I guess in a way, a lot of what you do now at Beansprout is teaching, in a sense, right? Just maybe not in the way that we recognize it, teaching in schools or things like that. One thing that I'm curious about is, as an analyst, would you say that how do you know whether an analyst is actually good at what they do?
I think to most people, the measure of whether an analyst is good or not is really how accurate the stock recommendations are. I think that is the common benchmark around whether an analyst is good. But I think what I often share with others would be that because it is a very competitive industry, because what you are often being judged upon is not just on the basis of your stock course that can be short-term in nature. What I often share with other research analysts is that there are two other important factors that would make one a good analyst. I think the first is the analysis and understanding of the industry and company and not just the outcome in itself. Because sometimes you might make a good recommendation, it might just be because you're lucky. Right? It might be that have a buy recommendation on the stock and coincidentally there is an announcement from macro developments, from political developments that provided a boost to the stock. Or that you have the best analysis on this company, but unfortunately COVID-19 strikes and tourism is impacted, healthcare sector is impacted, that doesn't reflect your underlying capabilities as an analyst. So I think to me, more importantly is how do you actually get there and being able to explain it to people that is important.
Right.
To me, the other factor that's important is more your value system and your integrity, because I think often people don't come to you simply because you've got a right call and whether or not you are just making them money. But I think through the different cycles that I've been through, often it is a question of whether you have the right approach when doing the analysis, whether this is something that you genuinely believe in, you are able to relay this message in a very honest manner and not actually doing it for a quick gain.
Right.
I think those are things that people actually are able to see for themselves and build your reputation in the market over time.
Right. So you did this for 12 years.
That's right.
Yeah. How did you go from doing that to then, starting Beansprout?
I have always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I think even from young, I've been reading a lot of the books by famous personalities like Richard Branson, 𝗵𝗵𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗃, and it was something that I am always interested in because personally, I value freedom and control a lot. So I think that is something that allows me to then exercise this freedom and control.
Right.
But I think coming from a very conventional pathway of going through JC, then uni, and then having a relatively comfortable job in a bank, this was then not top of the mind after I graduated, given that I had the opportunity to work in a role that I enjoyed in the initial years. But I think this was always something at the back of my mind around how I can eventually fulfill my dream of actually starting my own business.
Right. By the time when you were thinking about this, did you know what kind of business, or it was just this idea that you want to start your own business?
I never had any idea around what this was going to be. And I think this was also one of the things that stopped me from taking action because there was no concrete plan as such.
Right.
And then I guess if I needed to convince my more cautious or conservative self around then why I should give up a steady pay to then pursue this idea, it then wasn't entirely convincing, or there was always a reason that made me then cling on to the stability of my previous job.
Right. Okay. So then, what happened? How did you go from that to then starting Beansprout?
I think it was during the COVID period, which I believe was a period that afforded many of us the time and space to reflect on our lives. It was a period where there was a lot of uncertainty, a great deal of suffering for many people. But I think for some of us, it also then created the opportunity to think about actually how our lives are how we envision our lives to be when there is a lot of uncertainty ahead. And effectively, we are starting many things from ground zero.
Yeah.
I think that effectively hit the reset button for many people when everything fell apart. You didn't know actually whether you even get a chance to meet your close friends,
Yes.
your family members, the certainty of being able to even eat in a coffee shop. I think those were the things that we took for granted, but all the assumptions were effectively thrown out of the window during the period of time.
Yeah.
I think for myself, because the work also then slowed down, I then had more time to think about, actually, I've been doing the role of research analyst for 12 years. Now that I am entering my 40s, is there something that I want to be doing for the next 10, 20 years, or even longer period of time in my life? And if I want to be doing so, how do I start to transition towards this role?
Right. So at the time, how did you know that it would be, a financial wellness platform?
I think it was also coincidental that it was during that period of time when many people became interested in investing. I think it was a time when many people had more time to spare. After the initial sell down in the markets, we started to see some recovery, and many people then started to take an interest towards investing at that point in time.
Yeah. I remember that was when I started my own investing journey as well. Yeah.
So I think many of my friends went through that same experience, and many of my friends then at that point in time started asking me, how do I start investing?
Right.
What do I need to know? How do I set up a brokerage account? How do I pick stocks to invest in? What is an ETF? So I think during that period of time, I started receiving a lot of these questions when I realized that, actually, it was something that many people had questions around. It was something that I had some knowledge of from my previous work. And is that something that I can then share with them to help them get started on investing? So I started to get a few friends to my place to share about investing, answer their questions. Of course, within the limited capacity that was available with the safe distancing guidelines. So we had like small groups of 5 people, 4 of my friends at each time. And I think that was really how I realized that, actually many people are interested. They do not know how to actually do so.
Right.
And they actually gain a lot from these sessions that we had because from there, they were able to then gain the confidence towards investing and actually take the first step forward, even though they wanted to do it previously, but never had the confidence to be doing so.
Yeah. Wow. How many conversations like these would you say you're having at the time?
I was doing 2 of such small groups and we met like every other week.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
So these were like fairly consistent like conversations you were having.
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
Because what I always encourage is I can share this amount of knowledge with you, but what's always important is for you to try it out yourself. So what we will do is after the sharing, they will then go back and do their own stuff, try out some of these things that I've shared with them, whether is it researching on an ETF, researching on a stock, pressing the buy button on the brokerage app for themselves on the first time. I think those were the things that they tried out, and then they will come back with more questions around, I saw that there's this thing called the expense ratio when I was looking up the ETF. What does that actually mean? When I'm placing the order, I see things like a limit order. So what do these terms actually mean? I think that's the basis for our subsequent discussion.
Right. So looking back at that moment when you decided to start your own company, what do you remember being easy or difficult about that?
I think the easy part for me was actually coming up with the plan. So once I knew that this was something I wanted to pursue, actually what excited me was researching about what are the opportunities in the market, what are the different business models that we can pursue, what are the industry statistics like, because that was effectively what I was also doing as a research analyst, analyzing different businesses, but just that now I have the ability to do it for a business that I was going to start for myself.
Right.
So I actually spent a lot of time doing it, spent like 16 hours a day, and I was continuously excited about this thing that I was actually coming up with. I think I came up with a 200-page presentation deck that collated all of this information about the different things that we can do, what other companies are doing in overseas markets, and just trying to get references from there.
Wow.
So I think to me, that was the easy part in terms of doing all the background research. And then when it came down to the actual part of doing it,
the actual implementation.
The actual implementation was actually the difficult part. Which actually started from me having to firstly tell my boss that I wanted to leave the company.
Right.
Next, sharing with my family that I was going to quit my job and start a business.
Yeah.
And I think along the way, just very small things that you would take for granted were not as straightforward as it might appear to be. So I think because it was during the COVID period, even setting up a bank account took a couple of months because you had to make an appointment to go down to the bank. So I think that was where it started to then really entail the day-to-day stuff around how do you even get about doing some of these things outside of like this 200-page presentation deck that you have prepared.
Yeah. And how did friends, family, or even your colleagues react when you told them this?
I think naturally surprised because I was in a good position in my previous firm.
Yeah.
There were really very limited reasons why there were any push factors on why I would want to be leaving the job.
Yeah, it's not like you're unhappy or whatever. Yeah.
There was still decent runway for personal growth. It was well paying. And of course, it was during the COVID period where there's still a lot of uncertainty around how we are going to emerge after the pandemic.
Yeah.
So there was naturally a lot of concern by like my parents,
Yeah.
my friends around like, do you have to do it now?
Yeah.
Can things actually improve before you actually quit your job?
Yeah.
Do you have enough savings to get by? So I think those are all the questions that came up that effectively did make me rethink the decision for maybe a few minutes.
Yeah.
But I think because I already decided by then that this was something I wanted to do, it was really just about then just pushing ahead and pursuing this aspiration of mine.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, would you say there was any kind of urgency? Because, I mean, you could very well have waited maybe a couple more years where, maybe COVID had ended and things seemed like a little bit more positive. Yeah, why then?
I think the urgency really came through from the fact that I saw this need for financial education to be a fairly urgent one. I think it was during the COVID period where I think for those of us who are fortunate enough to still be able to get by, it wasn't that much of an issue being able to maybe not have that much of a bonus that year, but still being able to get through 2020 and 2021. We were able to say, get our food delivered if we didn't have the ability to go down to the physical store to get what we needed to get. I think for many people, it was also a time when this need for financial security became more acute because you really don't have the certainty around how long the economic uncertainty is going to last.
Yeah.
I think what it made me recall was when I started work in 2008 during the global financial crisis, where there was a lot of uncertainty in the market as well. Even for some of my friends who started work at that point in time, they lost their jobs within their first year of starting their first job.
Yeah.
So I think what has always been in my mind is that there is always a certain degree of economic uncertainty out there. So the urgency was how do we actually equip ourselves in a way that then allow us to be prepared for these things where we don't really know when it will ever come up and how would it impact us at different points in time.
Yeah. So in that sense, there's no sort of like perfect timing to do these things.
Yes, because for example, for COVID, it impacted maybe the tourism sector more. For the global financial crisis in 2008, it impacted the financial sector more. So I think what it did strike in my mind is that you don't really know when the next crisis is going to come and how you're going to be impacted by it. So I think that is then the urgency around if I can do something today, what can I do to be able to be better prepared today rather than tomorrow?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that I think many people don't have experiences of unless they themselves have started a business is really understanding that there's a big difference between being an employee and being an employer, right? And I'm wondering, for yourself, making that transition, first, starting a business, but then, starting to hire people, manage a team, like what was that transition like for you?
I think the transition for me was something that is still ongoing. The initial part was something that I had to try to understand how to get about doing many of the things that I had taken for granted in the past. Because I was working in a bank which was very well resourced, I think then having to gather a lot of the resources for myself as a startup became something that became top of the mind. So I think even in terms of how am I going to get my initial employees on board, how are they even going to believe in the vision, such that they are willing to give up their comfortable jobs to join a startup where there's definitely going to be a lot more uncertainty.
Yeah.
I think those were the things that I needed to find out. What is the best way to be able to gather enough resources to do what I needed to be doing.
Yeah.
So I think that is where the learning actually came in, to actually challenge myself to think about how do I think about the proposition of the company. I may have a 200-page presentation, but that effectively convinced myself, but it may not convince others around how this is something that they are then willing to sacrifice their current stability and actually join you on board this vision.
Yeah, and earlier you mentioned that, when you were growing up, you read a lot of all these like startup books and things like that. How much of that actually have you found to be useful, and was there any, on the flip side, was there any startup advice that you found was very ill-fitting for, what you started to do?
Okay, so I'm someone who enjoys reading. And I do read a lot of business books. In fact, often when I discuss with my friends what I'm reading, I'll share some of these business books I'm reading, and then they will say like, you should be reading more fiction books. Because I was trying to learn how to run a company, in my previous role, I had the opportunity to interact with different company management and learn from some of their experiences as well. But I think it's very different when you really have to be the one running the business yourself. So something that I often share with others is that in the past, when I was an analyst, it was often easy to ask difficult questions of others and critique others around what they should be doing better or what they should not be doing. But when you have to do it for yourself, you understand the practical constraints around why some things are done and why some things, as much as you want it to be done, cannot actually be done. So, I mean, I would read all of these books, but I think sometimes in terms of the implementation is when you realize that it might not be so easy to get some of these things done. So one very good example is, I mean, a lot of what the Silicon Valley entrepreneurs would often share is like, you should always get an A team on board. Right. I mean, it's not what your business is, but who you have on board. I think that is something that is often shared. And I mean, in the past, when I'm asking CEO questions, I would often also ask the question like, oh, why don't you hire someone better and effectively you'll be able to improve your sales or improve on your profitability. Then I think the practical part then comes in around when you really have to start hiring people, when you have to hire people on board. How do you practically get this A team on board? Right? Because all of them have good opportunities out there. You're not the only startup in the market. So what would actually make them want to be joining you? As much as I want like my team to be a superstar team, what is my value proposition to actually build this team? And is that something that I can support based on my current business as well as resources?
Yeah, and I think a lot of these complexities are around things like, why would they work for you rather than work for other people? Right? How do they know your business as a startup? Is it going to be around for another few years, or is this something that's going to go past in a year? In your case, like many of the current Beansprout team actually have been around since the beginning. So what was it like actually for you to bring them on board, and what do you think has kept them around all these years?
I think for a start, having a good idea around what the company's mission and vision is helpful, because I think knowing what you are doing, what is the purpose that it serves, definitely help people to understand what is the reason that we are doing what we are doing. So that is something that we constantly ask ourselves and share with the team around. It is not just about being able to put up content or just being able to share financial insights, but how does that actually impact the people who are reading this content and being able to help them grow their wealth? So I think being able to share this vision with the team has definitely helped us, because honestly, we are definitely not able to pay salary that is above the industry benchmark.
Right.
But I think just having this broader vision and mission is helpful in getting people excited, in getting people to understand the meaning of the work that they're doing, and then taking the step forward in then doing what needs to be done to have the impact that we want to create in the market.
Yeah, and in a way, I guess it's also a bit of that journey that you went through where you realized for yourself that it's not just about money, right? You could have very well stayed in a well-paying job, but at some point you realize that maybe this is not the impact that you want to be making, and so you end up weighing some of these different factors. I think similarly for people who decide to join startups, no one joins a startup because the salary is amazing, right? People join because you get more autonomy to work on what you care about, you get more freedom, you get to work with other driven, creative people and things like that. But beyond hiring, I mean, what are some lessons would you say you are still learning as an entrepreneur?
So earlier we talked about getting good people in the team and how that can be valuable in terms of being able to live out this mission that the company is actually set up for. I think outside of people, we constantly look at how different resources can effectively be tapped, how existing resources can be used better. So I think that then goes back to the questions around how do you prioritize your time? Because there are only that many things that we can do. So, I mean, even for content, there are so many different things that we can write about. How do we then decide there's something that we want to be writing about over something else?
Right, because you can't possibly be doing everything.
Yes, that's right. So I think in terms of prioritizing, that then becomes important around that is something that is aligned with our values, and that's something that's aligned with what value we are able to provide. Then I think relating to that is how do you actually say no to people? So I think in the past, I would often be accepting of most requests, especially in my previous role where a lot of it was serving clients and being accepting of some of the requests that are made. But I think in this particular case, it is also a question around, I have limited resources, I cannot be doing everything. How do we then decide that this is something that we want to be taking on? Or how do we then decide that there's something that we unfortunately have to turn away at this point in time simply because we just don't have the bandwidth to be doing so?
Right. On the flip side, are there things that this entrepreneurship journey has made you particularly grateful for?
I think something that I am very grateful for through this journey is really the help and assistance of many people. While I am a solo founder, I think we wouldn't have gotten to where we are today if not for the help of many, many people. So while our team is of 5 people, when I was actually looking through my list of people who are helping in many different ways, actually I can count more than 50 people who are actually helping us in different ways.
Right.
So it can be something as simple as if of an event, I need people to help with the registration. But my team has only 5 people. Who is going to help me with something as simple as doing the registration? Or it might be, say, I need to develop a relationship with the client and I need someone who can help me open the door towards it. How do I actually build this relationship?
Right.
So I think different people have come forward to help us at different points in time. And I think that allowed us to actually do something that is above what this small team is actually able to do, simply because we have got the help and assistance of many people along the way.
Right, and I guess to your point about managing resources as a startup, a lot of it is also how do we get creative with it? How do we tap on, people to help us in ways that other people might not think of?
So apart from the key members of the Beansprout team who have stayed with us through the early days until now, as well as the new members who have come on board who are contributing in many different ways, the non-Beansprout team members have also contributed in other ways that we may not have the current skill sets for. I think what we are also appreciative of is our early partners who actually believed in us, because I think when we started, you don't have the brand name, you are new out there, why should people actually take the leap of faith and actually go and actually work with you in particular projects?
Yeah, and I think something that we talked about is also that, it's, especially in the financial media space, trust is a very big factor when it comes to, the work that we do. As you talked about, early partners, how do you go about actually building that trust in the early days?
first and foremost, to me, it is being able to understand what is the value that we provide. How do we actually come in to offer something that is different?
Yeah.
To me, that is important because I may not be the one who, at that point in time, be the best. For example, when I started, I did not know anything about digital marketing. Right. So when I had one of my initial client meetings, I remember I didn't even know what's the difference between, say, page views and impressions. Right, because I came from a research background where, I mean, it's about valuation.
Yeah.
So I know how to do a DCF down to the very last detail.
Yeah.
But actually, I didn't know what was the difference between a page view versus a click. So I think those were the things that I then needed to learn and make sure that I was then able to come up with something that then convinced some of these partners around how we are able to meet some of their expectations. I think what also helped was then coming across as understanding what the financial market is about, what different financial products are about, because I think that is really where we are able to share more about what we know about the financial markets with the audience out there.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a nice segue into what I think we wanted to talk about today also, which is what is Beansprout like today as a brand. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about, maybe some of the values behind what we do. What is it that you are trying to build today in this market, and why does it matter so much to you?
To me, there are two key things that are very close to heart. I mentioned one of the points earlier, which is about creating a positive impact on consumers.
Yeah.
So to me, that is important because of the fact that what we really want to do is to be able to help people gain financial security in a period where there is high degree of economic uncertainty and a stronger desire by many people to be able to get a comfortable retirement. So the question that we often ask ourselves is, for whatever we are doing, how does it help more people to be able to do that? So to us, that is important.
Yeah.
And what we constantly try to do is, if we are putting out a new piece of content, does it actually help people to improve on their financial wellness?
Yeah.
Does it help people to grow their wealth? Does it provide a practical guide for people who want to be doing something to improve their financial position?
Right.
So I think that is the impact part that is important to us. The second part is really, how do we then become a responsible provider of this financial insight? Because there is definitely a lot of opportunities to be writing this financial content and sharing it with others.
Yeah.
But I think in this day and age, it is also important to then think about how do we then come across as being responsible when there are a lot of different individual needs of retail investors. Each of them might have their different objectives, risk appetite. How do I share my insights with them in a way that is helpful to them, comes across as being fair and balanced, and at the same time be able to help them make a better financial decision?
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we also talk about internally is, what are the kinds of content that we won't do, right? Not so much because there's anything bad about it, but it just doesn't quite align with our values. So, do you want to say a little bit about that?
Having many opportunities to think about content strategy, what do we write about, what we don't write about. The question that I'll often ask myself is, does this actually help someone who is reading the piece of content to make a better financial decision?
Yeah.
I think that is the benchmark that we hold at the end of the day, because that is really what we want to be doing with our content. And if it doesn't serve that purpose, then given the many different things that we can do, actually we don't have to be writing or doing an interview about that particular topic.
Right.
Some examples that may have come up is, say, in the recent general elections, should it be something that Beansprout should be writing about?
Right.
Naturally, if we were to write on something that is very topical, what many people are interested on at a point in time, it will garner a lot of eyeballs. It would probably get us more reach at a point in time. But then the question that I will ask is, does this actually help someone to improve on their financial wellness?
Right.
What is the value that I am providing if I come in to write something on this topic? And if I'm not able to convince myself of these two questions, then it is something that I would prefer to avoid.
Right. So just because it's making the news or it's in the headlines doesn't mean that it's something that we necessarily need to jump on.
That's right, yes.
Right.
So some other examples would be, I can do a comparison of, say, what is the average wage that Singaporeans are making, or maybe have some articles around job layoffs in the market. But then the question that I'll ask is, does that actually help people to improve their financial wellness? Or actually does it create more financial stress for people who then come across this content?
Right. Okay. So now at this point, I mean, having done this for over 3 years, how do you see Beansprout evolving over the next few years?
The most important question is still going back to our vision, which is how do we help people to improve their financial wellness?
Yeah.
So at this point in time, a lot of what we do is in the form of long-form article content, which is something that's gone traction amongst our growing community of readers.
Yeah.
But I think there's still a lot more that we can do there in terms of how we are able to cover a wider range of topics that actually help them better plan their retirement. How do we better equip them to be able to do so?
Right.
This can come through in the same format. It can come through in new formats like video format, which is something that we are expanding on at this point in time. So that's definitely something that you will see more of in the coming months. I think even within the stock research that we put out, I think how do we make it relevant to our readers? Do they still want it in a conventional PDF format? Do they actually find more value in terms of being able to hear directly from the company management to understand the direction of the company? Is the ability to then visit some of the assets owned by the companies more important? I think those are the different things that we'll continue to explore to be able to make the financial and investment research relevant for investors today.
Right.
I think at the end of the day, what we want to be doing is that if it is something that can help people to improve on their financial wellness, help them to get a better retirement, I think that is definitely something that we would explore. And if it is something that we feel we are in a unique position to be able to fill a gap in the market, then that's something that we will definitely explore as well.
Yeah, and I think especially at this time, I mean, there have been a lot of conversations about topics like, retirement, cost of living, and things like that. And I think this is where platforms like ours really can be quite valuable for people to actually have the information to decide, given some of these challenges that are happening, how can we actually make decisions that are better for ourselves based on what we know that we need.
So I think since the time Beansprout started in 2021, this need for financial stability has become actually more acute.
Yeah.
Because we have had higher inflation in the past few years. The economic outlook has become more uncertain with the tariffs, with the kind of dislocation brought about by AI. So I think it has become top of the mind for many of our readers and a growing part of consumers. So I think for us, it's how are we able to better guide consumers on some of these very pertinent decisions that they want to be making.
Right.
At the same time, what we also do see is that while there is a greater desire for this information, because there's a lot of other content that's out there, how are we able to cut through the noise to be able to provide guidance for people that is practical, that is relevant, and most importantly, trustworthy, so that they can actually then make these investment decisions with confidence.
So on that note, how are you actually defining financial wellness for yourself?
Financial wellness is having the freedom to do what I want to be doing. Because of the savings that I've been able to get from my first job, thankfully I was then able to then take on the risk of starting a business. I think that's something that I'm very thankful for, because otherwise I think I'll spend more time worrying about whether I can get by another year without a paycheck. But I think thankfully for myself, because there's been more financial planning that was done, I have some savings that I'm now able to earn a decent return from. So I think that actually provides me with the peace of mind to really focus on growing Beansprout. I think to me that is financial wellness, in that I have then the freedom to really pursue what matters to me in life. And to me at this point in time, it is really this aspiration on how Beansprout can create a larger impact to the society.
Yeah. And I guess in that sense, I mean, everyone's journey is different, right? I mean, as much as there are like best practices, tips, and things that we share, ultimately we are all trying to make decisions that suit the kind of aspirations and goals that we each individually have. So I think it sounds like actually there's a lot of work that we also need to do there to figure out, yes, we could do all of these things, but actually what is it that I want? And what are, some of the practices, habits that we need to put in place in order to make these things possible for ourselves.
Yep.
Yeah.
So something that we often share with our readers is that it is important to not just invest, but more importantly, know why you are investing, and also know what you're investing in. I think those are two questions that I have followed and have been helpful in shaping my guiding principles, because knowing why you invest actually pushes you to take the first step, right? Because if it is just about making a quick buck or being able to, say, get an additional 2% more by trading, that may not be that strong an impetus against many of the other competing demands that you might have, like raising a family, being able to spend quality time with your loved ones.
Yeah.
So I think knowing why you are investing is important, because that then helps you to decide why you want to be doing this and why you're actually spending time on it versus the many other things that you can choose to be doing.
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like financial wellness is really about balancing the what and the why. Yeah.
And then I think the question around understanding what you're investing in, I think that is really why we do the deep dive analysis on stocks, on different financial products, because I think what we really hope consumers can do is look beyond just the headline. I think for a stock, it's not just about, say, whether a broker puts out a buy rating, what the target price is, but what is unique about this company that wants you to put your hard-earned money into it. And likewise, if you are putting your savings into a financial product, what gives you the peace of mind to actually be willing to put your money into it? I think that is really what people need to understand so that they can invest with a peace of mind. And really, I think to me, that is what makes something worth investing in that you shouldn't have to constantly worry about it or lose sleep over it.
Right. Yeah, so one question that I wanted to ask was, for anyone who is looking to start their own business or they're looking to get into entrepreneurship, what kind of advice would you offer these people?
I think the first advice that I'll give is be willing and prepared to make many sacrifices. I think it was something that I did not actually anticipate the amount of sacrifices that it would actually entail. So I think now that I'm into my third year of the startup journey, it would definitely not be easy for most of the journey. In fact, I would say I've lost like half of my friends through the time that I did not have the ability to then just keep in touch with them or spend time with them. There's a lot of sacrifice on your personal time as well, because you would effectively then have to work on many different things at the same time when you may not have the resources to hire people to be helping you with it. So I think just being prepared for these sacrifices is something that I would encourage anyone who's thinking of starting a business to actually be prepared for. But then that comes the next part, which is then how do you mentally prepare yourself for some of the sacrifices? I think that is where the resilience actually comes in. And also then this mindset around how you think about the sacrifices and how it can be actually used for a more positive frame of mind in terms of what this can actually bring about. So I think in terms of resilience, because you are probably going to be rejected by many people, you're going to be rejected by people that you ask to join the team, but then decide not to take up the offer, rejected by clients who might go with a more established company. So you're probably going to face rejection from all over. But I think then how do you stand up time and again to be able to continue with your belief around why this needs to be done? And I think that is the part around then clarifying your intent, around why you are actually then willing to put in all of the sacrifices and be willing to actually take some of these rejections time and again. So I think for myself, it's something that has come up time and again in terms of understanding like, why do I even want to give up a stable job to be doing what I'm doing today? Is it something that I truly believe in? Is it just about wanting to build a company that is worth billions of dollars, or is there something that's larger to that?
Right.
I think those are the questions that you really need to be very honest with yourself on.
Yeah.
Because only when you're very clear on some of these objectives will you be able to go through the very difficult times
Right.
when you realize that you've not met your friends for 6 months,
Yeah.
you're working like 16 hours a day,
Yeah.
and still may not have the result that you would have expected to get.
Yeah. And I suppose on some level, there's no sort of like rational justification for why you would want to endure that much hardship, right? For an uncertain payoff.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think then understanding why you're doing this is important. I think for myself, while there have been sacrifices, what I am very thankful for is that this journey has actually given me much more in terms of the learning, in terms of the self-understanding, in terms of understanding what my self-worth is
Yeah.
in the face of repeated rejections. I think those are the things that I would probably not have been able to learn if I was actually in my previous role.
Yeah.
I think apart from that, just some minor things that I constantly remind myself of and has helped me to get through some of the more difficult times is, number one, think about the gains and not the gaps, because it is often easy to pick on things that are not doing well.
Yeah.
But then often, like when I then speak to my friends, they will say, oh, actually you have progressed quite a bit from
Right.
the past 1 year. But when you're very absorbed in
Yeah.
just solving the next
hard to
problem and getting to the next milestone, it's often hard to see that actually, if you compare where we are today versus, say, even 1 year ago,
Yeah.
where we don't even have this podcast that's up and running, it's actually progress that's been made. Then I guess the next thing is just giving yourself more credit,
Yeah.
because it really isn't that easy, even just to get a podcast started when your resources are tight and the odds are actually stacked against you.
Yeah, and in all, I think it sounds to me like the entrepreneurship journey is, of course, we all hope to make more money than we would in any kind of like stable job as an employee. But I think more than the potential upside, it is also really about, in a way, unlocking the access to a richer life. Right, the kind of experiences, the kind of challenges we go through, a lot of, I think, growth that we don't plan for, it happens inevitably, right? And it's whether we're able to meet that challenge and come out of it feeling like we have grown, we're better people, and we have achieved something that we're proud of.
So going back to the point around sacrifices and having a more positive mindset, I think in my previous self, I have seen all of this as sacrifices.
Yeah.
But I think what I would see it as today is that probably no other experience would actually afford me this ability to grow. And I think that is something that I am very thankful for, in that, yes, while there have been challenges, effectively those are the opportunities that really make you understand who you are as a person, and then also understand why this actually matters to you.
Yeah, and it's what makes your journey uniquely yours as well.
That's right.
Yeah. So you've shared a lot with us today, from, how your journey started, some of the things that you've been through, to, how we see financial media actually, the kind of role and responsibility that we have actually being in this business today. So as we wrap up today's episode, I was just wondering, if you have any final thoughts that, you would want to share with our audience.
So we have touched on quite a number of different topics. Earlier, you asked me what are some of the things that I am grateful for. I shared the different people who have helped to contribute towards Beansprout to help it to grow to where it is today. I shared about being thankful to different partners who have come on board. But I think there's one unique segment that I would also like to thank, and that is actually our readers and our community who have actually shaped us to be where we are today. Because a lot of the ideas that we have around what content to write, what we should do next actually come through from their feedback. So for example, we started doing this video content only after our community meetup, because many people shared that, they watch YouTube videos, they want video content as a way to be able to stay updated on what's happening in the financial markets. I think to me that is something that also has helped us to stay the course and actually push through some of the more difficult times, in that sometimes we actually receive feedback from our readers. For example, when we are writing something about how to apply for T-bills, for some of the writers, they might think like, why are we writing about T-bills again? But sometimes when we receive an email message from one of our readers who said that, I've been able to earn $5,000 more in my CPF because I learned about investing in the T-bills through an article that I read on your site.
Right.
I think that really brings back the practical aspect around the value of the work that we are doing. And likewise, for example, when we meet some of our community members at a physical event, that is when we get to see them in person and really get the feedback from them.
Right.
Often when we share some of this content on a digital basis, we don't know who is actually reading it.
Yeah.
Sometimes the comments online can be fairly nasty
Yeah.
and critical around what is actually being put out. But then when you come across some of our community members face to face, I think that's when they will share with you the actual questions that they have when it comes down to investing, what is actually stopping them from actually achieving their retirement goals.
Yeah.
I think that is really what pushes us harder to then think about what more can we actually do to really help them with these practical questions that they have at the back of their minds. So I think that is something that we constantly want to be doing.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that we would actually urge our readers, whoever is watching the video, to actually share with us your questions, your feedback around how we can better help you on some of the questions that you may have, the questions that are stopping you from having the confidence in achieving your financial plans.
Yeah.
Because I think that is really what we are here for and want to be helping you with. If there are further feedback, feel free to reach out to us. And I think we hope to be able to continue to grow Beansprout in a way that is meaningful to our readers and can really help them to achieve their financial wellness.
Okay, I think that's quite a nice place to wrap up today's episode. Thanks so much for sharing your story. And like Gerald has shared, all of these things, whether it's the podcast, more video content, things that we're doing on social media, these are all things that we're experimenting with, and we really hope to do more in the coming months. So we really value everyone's feedback. And if you like what we've been doing, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and we are Grow Beansprout on all social media platforms.